Imagine a world where humanity, united by a single language and a common purpose, decides to challenge the heavens. Now, think about how this unchecked ambition can lead to chaos and dispersion. This is the story of Nimrod and the Tower of Babel, a biblical narrative that teaches us about the dangers of pride and the limits of human ambition. But why does this story continue to fascinate us centuries later? What does it reveal about our nature and our deepest desires? Nimrod, a powerful and charismatic leader, dreamed of building a tower that would reach the heavens. He didn't just want to lead. He wanted to be remembered as someone who pushed the boundaries of the possible. However, this excessive ambition ultimately led to failure. The Tower of Babel, a colossal project that symbolized human unity and determination, became a monument to disobedience and pride. But what truly motivated Nimrod and his people to attempt something so audacious? And what can we learn from this story? The Bible tells us that God, upon seeing the arrogance of Nimrod and his people, decided to intervene by confusing their languages and scattering humanity. This divine act not only halted the construction of the tower, but also changed the course of human history. The confusion of languages gave rise to the linguistic and cultural diversity we see today, but also reminds us of the dangers of challenging established limits. And have you ever stopped to think about how this story applies to your life? In this text, we'll explore the mysteries of the Tower of Babel, from Nimrod's ambition to the consequences of his disobedience. We'll reflect on the lessons this story teaches us about pride, humility, and the importance of aligning our ambitions with a greater purpose. Get ready to dive into one of the most shocking and revealing stories in the Bible and discover how it can transform your perspective on success, failure, and the true meaning of building something that truly matters. Nimrod, a name that echoes through the centuries, was no ordinary man. The Bible describes him as a mighty hunter before the Lord, a figure who drew attention not only for his skills, but also for his influence over people. Imagine someone who, in that time, could unite tribes and lead with an almost magnetic authority. He was more than a hunter. He was a leader who inspired both admiration and fear. His reputation was so great that his name became synonymous with power and ambition. But what exactly made Nimrod such a remarkable figure in biblical history? To understand Nimrod, we need to go back to the context in which he lived. After the flood, humanity was reorganizing, and Nimrod emerged as one of the first great leaders. He didn't just hunt animals. He also hunted the hearts of people, winning followers and establishing important cities like Babel, Nineveh, and others. His ability to unite people around a common goal was impressive, but also revealed a dangerous trait, a thirst for power. Nimrod didn't just want to lead, he wanted to be remembered, perhaps even worshipped. And this leads us to an intriguing question. How far would he be willing to go to achieve his goals? The phrase mighty hunter before the Lord can be interpreted in several ways. Some see it as a compliment, while others see it as a veiled criticism. Was Nimrod using his skills for the common good, or was there something darker behind his fame? The Bible doesn't go into much detail, but it makes it clear that he was a controversial figure. His influence was so great that, even centuries later, his name is still associated with pivotal events, such as the construction of the Tower of Babel. And this makes us wonder, what was the true legacy Nimrod wanted to leave behind? It's interesting to note how Nimrod's story connects with issues we still face today. How often do we see leaders who, though talented, end up consumed by their own ambition? Nimrod serves as an example of how power can corrupt, especially when there are no clear limits. He had everything it took to be a great leader, but his thirst for recognition may have been his downfall. And have you ever stopped to think about how the desire to be remembered might influence your decisions? Are we building something that truly matters, or are we just seeking our own glory? Finally, Nimrod's story sets the stage for what comes next, the construction of the Tower of Babel. His reign and reputation were the foundation for one of the most shocking events in the Bible. But what drove Nimrod and his people to attempt something so audacious? What was behind that excessive ambition? These are questions that lead us to the next chapter of this fascinating and mysterious story. Nimrod was not the type to settle for little. His ambition was as vast as a tower he dreamed of building. Imagine someone who looks up at the sky and thinks, "Why not reach it?" That was Nimrod's mindset. He didn't just want to lead. He wanted to transcend, to leave a mark that would challenge even the boundaries of the divine. But what exactly motivated him to attempt something so audacious? What was behind this desire to touch the heavens? Nimrod's ambition can be seen as a mix of pride and fear. On one hand, he wanted to prove that humanity was capable of great feats, perhaps even rivaling God himself. On the other hand, there are hints that he feared being scattered across the earth as it happened to previous generations. The Tower of Babel, therefore, wasn't just a monument. It was a declaration of independence, an attempt to control his own destiny. But was this quest for autonomy truly justified, or was it just a way to mask the fear of the unknown? It's fascinating to think about how this story repeats itself, in a way, in our lives today. How often do we try to build towers to feel secure? Whether through material achievements, status, or power, we often seek something that gives us the illusion of control. Nimrod shows us that when ambition oversteps the bounds of humility, we may end up building something that, in the end, has no foundation. And have you ever stopped to reflect on what truly motivates your ambitions? Are they aligned with a greater purpose? Or are they just a way to fill a void? In Nimrod's view, the Tower of Babel was more than construction. It was a symbol of unity and strength. He believed that if everyone worked together, nothing would be impossible. And in a way, he was right. The problem is that this unity was based on a misguided goal to challenge the heavens. This makes us think, to what extent is unity beneficial when the purpose behind it is questionable? Nimrod teaches us that no matter how much we work together, we need to be sure we're building something truly worthwhile. Finally, Nimrod's ambition leads us to reflect on human limits. He wanted to reach the sky, but was that a realistic goal? Or, by trying to go beyond what was permitted, did he end up losing what he already had? This story sets the stage for the next chapter, the construction of the Tower of Babel. How was this colossal project put into practice? What were the challenges and meanings behind this endeavor? These are questions that lead us to explore even more the mysteries of the Bible. The construction of the Tower of Babel was no ordinary project. It was a symbol of ambition, unity, and ultimately rebellion. For Nimrod and his people, the tower represented much more than a simple structure of bricks and bitumen. It was a declaration of independence, an attempt to create something that would challenge even the heavens. But what truly motivated this construction? What was behind this collective desire to reach the unreachable? For Nimrod, the Tower of Babel was the embodiment of his dream of greatness. He saw the tower as a way to consolidate his power and ensure that his name would be remembered forever. It was a way of saying, "Here we are, and nothing can stop us." For the people, on the other hand, the tower represented security and identity. They were united by a common purpose, and this gave them a sense of belonging. But was this unity genuine, or was it being manipulated by Nimrod for his own ends? It's interesting to know how the Tower of Babel can be seen as a reflection of our own ambitions. How often do we join others in pursuit of a goal without questioning whether that goal is truly valid? History shows us that no matter how noble a cause may seem, it's essential to examine the motivations behind it. Nimrod and his people were building something grand. But were they building something good? And have you ever stopped to think if the projects you embrace are aligned with your deepest values? The tower also had a profound symbolic meaning. It represented humanity's attempt to control destiny, to create an alternative reality where God was unnecessary. It was as if they were saying, "We can do this on our own." But was this independence real or just an illusion? Nimrod and his people were so focused on reaching the sky that they forgot to look at the ground, at the foundations that sustained their lives. And this leads us to an important reflection. To what extent can our quest for autonomy distance us from what truly matters? Finally, the construction of the Tower of Babel sets the stage for the next chapter of this fascinating story. Divine intervention. What happened when God decided to intervene? How did Nimrod and his people react when they saw their project crumble? These are questions that lead us to explore even more the mysteries of the Bible and the lessons we can learn from them. Imagine a construction so grand that it could be seen from anywhere on Earth. That was the Tower of Babel, a project that challenged not only the engineering of the time, but also the limits of human ambition. Nimrod and his people spared no effort to erect this colossal structure. They used fire-baked bricks and bitumen as mortar, materials that, at the time, represented the pinnacle of construction technology. But what truly made this tower so impressive? And what did it mean to those who were building it? The Tower of Babel wasn't just a feat of engineering. It was a symbol of unity and determination. The people worked side by side, sharing a common goal: to reach the heavens. Every brick laid was an affirmation of their capability and a declaration of independence. However, this unity also hid a fragility. They were so focused on building something grand that they forgot to question whether this grandeur had a real purpose. And have you ever stopped to think if the projects you embrace have a true purpose, or they're just a way to fill a void? The construction of the tower also reveals a lot about human nature. Nimrod and his people were willing to dedicate time, energy, and resources to something that, deep down, was an attempt to challenge the divine. They believed that together, they could achieve the impossible. But was this belief based on a realistic vision, or was it just an illusion? History shows us that no matter how hard we try, there are limits we cannot surpass. And this leads us to an important reflection. To what extent is our determination healthy, and when does it become an obsession? It's fascinating to think about how the Tower of Babel can be seen as a mirror of our own lives. How often do we dedicate ourselves to projects that, in the end, bring no real benefit? Nimrod and his people were building something grand, but were they building something good? The tower was a symbol of their ambition, but also of their disconnection from what truly matters. And this makes us think, what are we building in our lives? Are we focused on what really matters? Or are we just trying to impress others? Finally, the construction of the Tower of Babel sets the stage for the next chapter of this fascinating story. Divine intervention. What happened when God decided to intervene? How did Nimrod and his people react when they saw their project crumble? These are questions that lead us to explore even more the mysteries of the Bible and the lessons we can learn from them. Imagine the chaos. One day, everyone is working together, speaking the same language, understanding each other perfectly. The next day, no one can communicate. This was the moment when God decided to intervene in the construction of the Tower of Babel. The Bible tells us that upon seeing the unchecked ambition of Nimrod and his people, God came down to confuse their languages. Suddenly, what was once a cohesive team turned into a crowd of people who could no longer understand each other. But why did God do this? What does this intervention teach us about human limits? The confusion of languages was more than a punishment. It was a reminder that there are limits we cannot cross. Nimrod and his people were so focused on reaching the heavens that they forgot to look at the ground, at the foundations that sustained their lives. God, in his infinite wisdom, knew that if he allowed the construction to continue, the result would be disastrous. The divine intervention was, therefore, a way to protect humanity from itself. And have you ever stopped to think about how limits can actually be a form of protection? It's fascinating to note how the confusion of languages affected not only the construction of the tower, but also the dynamics of the people. Suddenly, those who once worked together could no longer understand each other. This makes us think about the importance of communication in our lives. How often do projects fail simply because people can't communicate effectively? The story of the Tower of Babel shows us that no matter how good our intentions are, a lack of communication can lead to failure. And this leads us to an important reflection. How can we improve our communication to avoid misunderstandings and conflicts? The divine intervention also teaches us about humility. Nimrod and his people were so confident in their abilities that they forgot there is something greater than themselves. The confusion of languages was a reminder that no matter how hard we try, there are things beyond our control. And this makes us think, to what extent can our self-confidence lead us to make mistakes? Do we sometimes need to stop and recognize that we can't do everything on our own? Finally, the divine intervention sets the stage for the next chapter of this fascinating story: the consequences of disobedience. What happened after the languages were confused? How did Nimrod and his people deal with the failure of their project? These are questions that lead us to explore even more the mysteries of the Bible and the lessons we can learn from them. The failure of the Tower of Babel was more than the collapse of construction. It was a collapse of a dream. Nimrod and his people had invested time, energy, and resources into a project that, in the end, came to nothing. The confusion of languages not only halted the construction, but also scattered the people. Suddenly, those who were once united found themselves unable to understand each other, and the tower that symbolized their ambition was abandoned. But what can we learn from this failure? And how did it affect humanity? The first consequence of disobedience was a scattering of the people. Once united by a common language and purpose, they were now divided, unable to continue the project. This makes us think about the importance of unity and communication. How often do projects fail simply because people can no longer work together? The story of the Tower of Babel shows us that no matter how good our intentions are, a lack of communication can lead to failure. And this leads us to an important reflection. How can we maintain unity in our projects, even in the face of challenges? Another consequence was the emergence of different languages and cultures. The confusion of languages not only scattered the people, but also gave rise to the linguistic and cultural diversity we see today. In a way, this can be seen as a blessing in disguise. Diversity teaches us to value differences and learn from them. However, it also challenges us to find ways to communicate and collaborate despite these differences. And have you ever stopped to think about how diversity can enrich our lives if we know how to handle it positively? The failure of the Tower of Babel also teaches us about humility. Nimrod and his people were so confident in their abilities that they forgot there is something greater than themselves. The failure was a reminder that no matter how hard we try, there are things beyond our control. And this makes us think, to what extent can our self-confidence lead us to make mistakes? Do we sometimes need to stop and recognize that we can't do everything on our own? Finally, the failure of the Tower of Babel sets the stage for the next chapter of this fascinating story: the lessons learned. What can we take away from this story about pride and humility? How can we apply these lessons in our lives? These are questions that lead us to explore even more the mysteries of the Bible and the lessons we can learn from them. The story of the Tower of Babel is a treasure trove of lessons, especially when it comes to pride and humility. Nimrod and his people show us what happens when ambition oversteps the bounds of humility. They were so focused on reaching the heavens that they forgot to look at the ground, at the foundations that sustain their lives. But what exactly can we learn from this story? And how can we apply these lessons in our lives? The first lesson is about the dangers of pride. Nimrod was a talented leader, but his thirst for power and recognition blinded him. He wanted to build a tower that would challenge the heavens, but he ended up building a monument to his own ego. This makes us think, how often are our ambitions driven by the desire to impress others rather than to pursue a true purpose? The story teaches us that pride can lead us to make mistakes that, in the end, only distance us from what truly matters. Another important lesson is about humility. The divine intervention was a reminder that there are limits we cannot cross. God confused the languages to show that no matter how hard we try, there are things beyond our control. This teaches us the importance of recognizing our limitations and seeking guidance from something greater than ourselves. And Have you ever stopped to think about how humility can help us avoid mistakes and find a more meaningful path? The story also teaches us about the importance of unity and communication. Nimrod and his people were united by a common purpose, but when the languages were confused, that unity fell apart. This makes us reflect on how communication is essential for any project, big or small. How often can misunderstandings and miscommunications lead to failure? The lesson here is clear. We need to strive to keep communication open and effective, even in the face of challenges. Finally, the story of the Tower of Babel teaches us about the importance of aligning our ambitions with a greater purpose. Nimrod and his people were building something grand, but were they building something good? The tower was a symbol of their ambition, but also of their disconnection from what truly matters. And this makes us think, what are we building in our lives? Are we focused on what really matters? Or are we just trying to impress others? Finally, the story of the Tower of Babel sets the stage for the next chapter of this fascinating journey. Its influence on culture and history. How has this story been interpreted over the centuries? What impact has it had on art, literature, and society? These are questions that lead us to explore even more of the mysteries of the Bible and the lessons we can learn from them. So, what can we take away from this fascinating story of Nimrod and the Tower of Babel? More than just a biblical narrative, it's a mirror that reflects our own ambitions, fears, and challenges. Nimrod showed us that no matter how talented and determined we are, pride can lead us to build monuments to our ego rather than something that truly benefits humanity. And you? Have you ever stopped to think about what you're building in your life? Are your towers made of purpose and humility, or just bricks of vanity? The story of the Tower of Babel challenges us to reflect on our motivations. How often do we join others in projects that, in the end, bring no real benefit? The confusion of languages reminds us that communication is essential, but also that we need to be aligned with a greater purpose. And this leads us to a crucial question. How can we ensure that our actions are in harmony with our deepest values? Why not start by evaluating your goals and asking, does this really matter? Furthermore, the divine intervention teaches us that there are limits we cannot cross. The humility to recognize that we cannot control everything is one of the greatest acts of wisdom. And have you ever stopped to think about how humility can transform your life? Why not practice daily gratitude or seek guidance from something greater than yourself? Small actions can make a big difference. Finally, the Tower of Babel inspires us to seek a true purpose. Nimrod and his people were building something grand, but were they building something good? This story challenges us to look at our own lives and ask, what really matters? Why not start today to build something that leaves a positive legacy? Whether through good deeds, meaningful projects, or simply being a better person, you can make a difference. So, are you ready to apply these lessons in your life? Why not share your reflections in the comments and discuss how we can, together, build something that truly matters? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep learning about fascinating stories like this one. After all, the journey of self-discovery and growth never ends, and we're here to walk it together. Let's build something amazing.